Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today in War Thunder we're having a look at another devblog. This is for update 1.85 again, and it is the F-100D. Of course, yesterday we had a few news articles looking at the supersonic jets which are coming to game, and one of them, well, it was the F-100D. Now, which F-100 Super Sabre is this? Well, the D version is a fighter-bomber version. This means that it will have access to extra weaponry, whether it comes in the form of missiles, bombs, and I suppose it's guns and all of these wonderful things. But basically, you have a vast array of different armaments which will be useful in the air and also useful on the ground. What is interesting is they actually say the F-100 has features unsurpassed speed. Now, unsurpassed means, at least in my head, the best, right? Now, I don't know whether it's talking about currently in-game, because obviously currently in-game this thing just outshines everything. But when I have compared its statistics, and when Unknown has also compared the statistics using the documents which I went over the other day, the F-100D is slightly slower than the MiG-19 PT. Now, it is very slightly slower, but it is still slower by around about 20 miles an hour, which can make a decent difference, and its acceleration for the MiG-19 is way higher than the F-100. So for me, when I look at these stats, when I think about, its effect in the game, I wouldn't call that unsurpassed. So unless it's a translation thing, or unless I've got something wrong, which could also happen, that just seems a little bit odd to me. So, the F-100D, what are we getting out of this? Well, we are getting the top-tier Rank 6 American aircraft. It has 4 20mm mounted in the nose of the machine. Now, in the devblog itself, it actually talks about these 20mm being the M39A1s, and these are... it says that a gun that should be familiar to War Thunder pilots from the F-86 F2. So, I should actually read that again, sorry. The M39A1s, the 20mm that you see on the F-100, are an upgraded version of the SMT T-160s on the F-86 F2. So they are not the same cannons that you find on the F2, but an upgraded version. This means really high fire rate, really high muzzle velocity, something that is great in jet combat. And another thing that you must understand is these have a ton of ammunition in them, meaning that if you miss a few passes, as long as you take a decent amount of fuel, you should be able to finish off targets once they either run out of ammo or once they run out of speed, especially when we're talking about other 9.0 vehicles compared to the F-100. So one of the big issues with the F2 Sabre is its guns. The cannons, you have to really lightly burst fire, especially if you don't have the upgrades for them. The cannons themselves, they used to spark a lot. A lot of people actually preferred using the 50 cal sabers, the F-25 and so on, and I can understand why. Generally, bang for your buck, the F-25 will do not as much damage, but it will do more efficient damage. It will do less RNG damage, I think would be the way to put it. And when you are going in those very high-speed situations, you need a gun which is much more reliable than it is actually burst mass-wise, if that makes sense. Now, hopefully, now with some of the most recent patches, and hopefully once update 1.85 comes out, these 20mm will be deadly as all hell and be able to annihilate anything very quickly, because as these jets get faster, and as you know, we're hitting supersonic levels with the F-100, the chances that you get to shoot enemies are going to be even smaller. One of the things why a lot of these jets have gone away from machine guns, they still primarily have them on their aircraft, a lot of even modern day ones do, but they favor stuff like missiles, they favor stuff which is more automated. The reason for this is because, first of all, you can engage at longer distances, and also because of the speed that these things are going at, it is very hard to get a clear shot on them like you would do in, let's say, World War II. So with that said, even though the guns should be incredibly good, they may not be the biggest factor of this machine. The biggest factor for me, when I look at it in a realistic, is the sidewinders. Now, we see the sidewinders in this video working here. It's obviously just shooting at a target, which is straight ahead, so it doesn't really, make that much of a massive difference. It just seems to go in a straight line. But in this devblog, they do talk about how these sidewinders may or will work, So if we read right here, it talks about the armaments that this can get. So it can get 500, 750, 1,000 pound explosive bombs, and you can see them marked here. And this is really, really interesting. I like the configuration of it. I think it's lovely. And then you have unguided Hydra 70s, which we already have. Guided AGM-12 bullpups. So the missiles that we have on the FJ4B, the gift version, which took over the game for a while because of the way that the camera worked on them. But they're coming to the F-100 as well. So these are keyboard-guided missiles, I think would be the way to call them. And then on top of this, you also have the air-to-air AIM or AIM-9B sidewinders. And this is how they're going to work. So these infrared-guided missiles will follow the target's thermal signature, which allows pilots to engage and destroy any airborne target that produces enough heat in flight to be targeted. So in practice, this means that a War Thunder pilot can target any jet aircraft, helicopter, or turboshaft engine, or certain piston engine models with a sidewinder, and be confident about the results. So it's basically tracking heat sources. Now, something that was mentioned in the other news article that they talked about, the air-to-air missiles, is that there would be some kind of lock-on period, or they were thinking about maybe doing that. And with that said, when we add on this idea of this thermal signature, we start getting some interesting ideas. And for me, I just can't wait to hit the dev server and try these out just to see how they work. I wonder if they're going to be a modification as well. And this is something I'll talk about in a bit. So with these AIM-9B sidewinders, this is the big upgrade that the F-100 is going to get. And as I've said before, the machine guns are important, cannons, I should say, are important, but I don't think they're going to be the main deadly force behind this F-100. Instead, what is going to be is these sidewinders, and that's going to be the same for the other two supersonic aircraft as well. So it's going to be very important to see how these work, how accurate they are, and how they hold on to a target. One of the things that hasn't really been discussed yet, only in very small senses in the yesterday's news thing, is how crew skills are going to affect this. If you if you've played a lot of naval, one of the crew skills is kind of a torpedo spotting, distance. So your crew will spot a torpedo from so far away, and as you increase the crew skill, that means that you can spot that torpedo further away, so you have more time to react to it. Now, if this works in jets, then we may have either some improvements to the awareness crew skill, or the keen vision, crew skill. Maybe those come into play. I wonder how it's going to affect stuff like this, because obviously the quicker you know about a missile, the better, since you'll have more time to dodge it. I also wonder if there will be tricks that will come in play, such as turning off your engine. How will that affect the sidewinder coming in? Obviously, in a real-world scenario, I don't know how much that would affect it, but I feel like in War Thunder there could be some really interesting things that happen once you do that. Just whether it's either tied to the engine or whether it's tied to the heat itself. Like I would just love to sit down with one of the developers and ask them how these are modeled and how they're doing. Does every jet or every plane just have a significant heat signature attached to it, or is it attached to the engine itself? What if the engine is off? How does it work in that sense? I would just love to talk about it. Another thing to say about the F-100 that we can tell from this picture here is that you can get multiple different or secondary armaments on the F-100. So you can see we have the bullpup, and then we have the bombs. So there seems to be some configurations of these secondary armaments, which means that you can take multiple of a certain armament and multiple of another. I personally think that's kind of nice. Also, the skin is lovely on this. You know, the US Air Force, you got the red thing here, you got the you got the little needle with the red and white stripe, and then of course this on the back here. So the skin overall is very nice on it. I wonder if we'll get a more plain skin as well. There doesn't seem to be one here at all. Another thing is, so secondary armaments that I mentioned before. Something that we've seen with a lot of late jets is that they do have modifications for secondary weapons, but they are incredibly expensive to research. And I wonder if that's going to be the same with these Sidewinders. One of the things, when I look at the helicopters, that makes me not want to play helicopters, is the grind between the helicopters and also the grind between the modifications in order to be useful. I do not want to play an version of a helicopter without ATGMs. ATGMs are the only reason that the helicopters are powerful in any way. So why would I first of all want to play something that doesn't have it, and why would I want to grind through a helicopter without ATGMs? So that modification is key to a lot of these vehicles. My guess is with the F-100, it's going to have a ton of secondary armaments, and they're going to include bombs, bullpups, obviously the Hydras, and the question is, will these Sidewinders also be secondary modifications? Or will they just be out, by default? Will you get them as default for this machine? And if you don't, grinding through them is going to be a pain in the ass, because you don't have anything else to actually use apart from your cannons to be able to kill stuff, which, as we've already talked about, is not going to be easy to do. So, with all of this said, the question has to be, once again, is there too much of a difference between this vehicle fully upgraded and stock? Now, I know already we haven't had a look at the modification list, so this is all speculation, but I'm going on what we've seen in the past when we look at helicopters and what we've seen from rank 6 jets and just generally planes in general. All of these secondary armaments of planes have to be researched. It is very hard to find a plane which isn't something like an attacker, which has let's just say fighters. It's very hard to find a fighter plane in War Thunder which has a secondary armament unlocked at the start, especially a jet. So with that said, with the F-100, we will have to spade it, going through the secondary armaments, probably getting the Sidewinders, on top of all the engine and everything like that modifications. And the question is, will the stock version of the F-100 be completely different to the fully upgraded one? It's an argument I've been talking about for a very long time in War Thunder. The idea that a stock vehicle is completely useless compared to its fully upgraded self. And we are adding in new mechanics here, such as countermeasures to stuff like Sidewinders or air-to-air missiles, and then the air-to-air missiles themselves, then the supersonic idea, then even other mechanics which are coming fully fledged to the game, such as the AGMs, which have only come in the form of the FJ before. Like, we're getting a lot of new mechanics here, and if they are behind modifications, then the difference between just a stock vehicle in this and a fully upgraded is just bonkers, right? Absolutely bonkers. So do we go down the argument, once again, of changing BRs of vehicles depending on what modifications they have? Or do we just make it so the stock version of these vehicles is better than what, we would be used to? Because I don't want to play this thing if I don't have Sidewinders, right? And I understand that is part of the marketing model, that is part of the business model, where they want you to gold stuff like Sidewinders. I understand that. But from a personal point of view, I don't research vehicles with gold. I've never used gold to research anything. I've never used gold to research modifications, never used it to research any vehicle, and I never will, because I think that takes away from the integrity point when I start making, videos on stuff like this. So for me, I want to experience what the average player experiences when I grind these vehicles. And if we're not getting these modifications right off the bat, it's going to be a rough grind. And any stock F-100 should get absolutely blasted by anything which has these missiles when it comes to air-to-air, or when it comes to any of the jets which are fully upgraded. And this is a big problem that, rank 5 jets already have. A fully upgraded jet is so much better than a stock jet, and I don't want this exemplified with the new mechanics of rank 6. We will have to see though. Hopefully on the dev server, we'll have a look at the modifications, and hopefully we'll see some of the secondaries unlocked from the start. Overall, I am happy to see this come to game. It does signify a next step in aviation history, which I'm happy about. Will I generally play these vehicles alongside many others? Probably not. I will sit back and enjoy watching the wonderful jet pilots play with them. I'm personally not the best jet pilot, but I do really appreciate watching great jet pilots go to work. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.